If my live stream ends. Okay. Okay. What's goody? Stream. Alright. Now what's good, everyone? Oh, let me do something. What's good, everyone? I'm in Discord. Was it Willie's Basement? W. Okay, guys. All right, here we go. If I laugh, stream ends. Sub equals shout out. Yeah. Hold on, let me move this actually. Move this, make it bigger. There we go. Y'all see that? Let me make it. There we go. Is it good? I think it's good. I think we're good. Alright. I'm gonna put it right up here, actually. So y'all names can be on the screen. Alright, here we go. Sub equals shout out. Double tap the screen. Let's go. If I laugh, stream ends. Alright, let's go.
Up at 2 a.m. with a pain in my head so sharp.
Yeah, wrong thing. Hold on. Wrong thing, guys. Hold on, guys. Yes. W uses acting films in the chat. Where did we leave off? Just gonna do this.
When you get stitches, a doctor threads a needle through your wound and pulls it tight to close the skin. As the stitches hold the edges together, the wound becomes inflamed as new cells begin to repair the tissue. Afterwards, connective tissues and collagens start to create skin. Then, blood vessels form to nourish these developing tissues, filling in the area. And over a few weeks, the wound will have healed together and the stitches are removed. When you get stitches, a doctor threads a needle through your wound and pulls it tight to close the skin. If you get a splinter, most people just go ahead and pull them out. But sometimes they get lodged so deep into your skin that you can't reach them. If the area gets infected, it will start to swell as pus forms under the skin. This creates pressure around the splinter that can sometimes push it upwards towards the skin's surface. And if you're lucky, after a certain period of time, your body could have completely removed it from your skin. If you get a splinter, most people just go ahead and pull them out. But sometimes they get lodged so deep into your skin that you can't reach them. If the area gets
Have you ever noticed how odd the McFlurry spoon is? Well, some people think it's supposed to work like a straw, but you only have to try that once to realize it does not work. The true reason for these weird spoons is actually pretty genius. You see, McDonald's didn't want to clean their beaters after every McFlurry, so instead, they designed a spoon that would also work as the mixer. Have you ever noticed?
If you shot a bullet at ancient armor, some people think it could actually stop the impact. But armor like chainmail was designed to block slashing swords. And plate armor was even better at deflecting strikes, by spreading the blunt force across more area, lessening its impact. But these materials weren't very good at stopping arrows, which had enough energy to enter the armor. So a bullet would have no trouble going right through. If you somehow removed all of the blood vessels in your body and tied them together, you might think it would be about this long. But the human body has thousands of these tiny vessels that weave in and out of every body part. And with all of them combined, if you started in New York, your blood vessels would make it all the way to the Grand Canyon. It would go on to reach all the way across the Pacific Ocean, over Japan, Japan, Asia, and all of Europe. And not only would it make it all the way back to your starting point, but it would be able to make this trip 2 to 4 times over. If you
This is how I made this hoodie with a print.
When a doctor gives you a shot, they can sometimes accidentally push the needle all the way through your vein, which ends up puncturing both sides. Once the needle is removed, it leaves 2 holes in the vein. And before the body can thicken the blood and seal these holes, it bleeds into the surrounding tissues. This leaked blood forms a dark, tender area under the skin, creating bruises and splotchy areas. If everyone on Earth clipped their toenails and threw them into the ocean, you might think they'd float and blanket a huge area. But toenails don't actually float, so they would pile up at the bottom of the ocean. As over 82 billion clippings rain down, it would choke fish and smother the seafloor until a massive pile broke through the surface. And after this global clipping, you would have a walkable toenail island, 10 times bigger than Central Park. When a firing squad shoots a prisoner, one of the bullets actually isn't real. You see, one of the rifles is loaded with a blank, but it still fires and kicks back when the trigger is pulled. The soldiers aren't told which rifle it is, casting doubt on who actually shot and killed the man. This way, the soldiers can feel less guilty and sleep at night, knowing there was a chance that they weren't the one to kill him. When a firing squad shoots a prisoner, one of the bullets actually isn't real. You see, one of the rifles is loaded with a blank, but it still fires and kicks back.
Have you ever wondered how this trick is done? It's one of those things where you know he can't actually be making the salt disappear, but it's still confusing to look at. Well, it turns out that the simplest explanation is the right one. Look closely at his hand during this shot. Do you notice how he sort of grabs his thumb here? Well, this is because he's using a prop called a Dofi finger. He holds it in his fist like a cup, fills it up with the salt, gets it onto his other thumb, and then grabs it off his thumb back into the first position. Watch it again and see if you can notice. Have you ever wondered?
If you lose one of your adult teeth, the bone where the tooth once was can start to deteriorate. To prevent further damage, a dentist will fill the cavity with a synthetic material that mimics real bone. Once filled, a metal bracket is secured on top and the incision is closed. After the graft has healed, a large implant post is inserted into the new bone. Then a small metal piece is screwed in and a porcelain tooth is secured on top. If you lose one of your adult teeth, the bone where the tooth once was can start to deteriorate. To prevent further damage, a dentist will fill the cavity with a synthetic material that mimics real bone. Once filled, a metal bracket is secured on top and the incision is closed. After the graft has healed, a large implant post is inserted into the new bone. Then a small metal piece is screwed in and a porcelain tooth is secured on top. If you
take control of business fuel.
They opened the pallet of ammunition only to find it was full of Tootsie Rolls. You see, Tootsie Roll was a code name for mortar rounds, which the Marines desperately needed. But the radio operator who received the order didn't know that and sent the actual candy instead. At first, the Marines were angry, but the sub-freezing temperatures had frozen all their food, and the candies ended up sustaining them over the next few days. They even used them to plug bullet holes by warming them up and letting them freeze in place. And eventually, the real mortar rounds did arrive. They opened the... If you accidentally touched a table saw, you'd probably think your fingers would be cut off. But this isn't always the case. You see, some modern high-end saws actually know the difference between wood and your skin. Once your finger comes in contact with these special saws, it immediately detects the electrical conductivity from your skin. This triggers an immediate mechanical response that stops the blade in less than 5 milliseconds. If you accidentally When a honeybee stings a human, they actually get stuck for a while and can't leave. And this is because their stinger is barbed, which means it can't retract once it's lodged into something. But once the bee finally pulls away, its insides get ripped out because the stinger stays in the skin. This leaves the bee without some of its internal organs, resulting in its death. When a honeybee stings, have you ever wondered about this little dangly thing at the back of your throat? Well, even though it looks like a miniature punching bag, it actually serves a handful of important functions. You see, when you swallow food, this thing called a uvula actually swings backwards to prevent the food from going up your nose. It's also constantly producing saliva to keep the throat moist, which aids in swallowing. And because there's a tiny muscle inside the uvula, it can move around, which helps you speak. Have you ever... A red-hot iron is pushed into the tree, wounding it on purpose. Then a syringe filled with salt water is emptied inside the hole. This causes the tree to flood the damaged area with sticky resin to stop the damage. And over the next few years, the resin slowly spreads, turning into a sweet-smelling wood deep inside the trunk. Finally, it's harvested and sold for thousands of dollars per pound before being made into a luxury perfume. If you stuck a long sword out of a car aiming for a tree, the sword would obviously snap and rip from your hands. But what if the sword is unbreakable, you have an indestructible grip, and your body is physically immovable? Well, the force would then transfer to the car. It would screech to a halt as the sword hits. But what if the car can't stop and is forced to keep moving? Now the tree should split in half. But if the tree is indestructible too, with no way to break, bend, or stop, the energy has nowhere to escape. Would this unleash a massive shockwave as powerful as a nuclear explosion? Or worse, something reality itself isn't equipped to contain? If you're stuck in a water slide that's filling up with water, most people think they should try to climb back up. But the slippery surface makes this nearly impossible. Instead, focus on staying calm and try to create space for air by tilting your head back. If water keeps rising, use your hands to push yourself forward. If you can't move, brace yourself as the water fills the slide entirely. Once the pressure equalizes, you may be able to push forward and float to safety. If you're stuck, imagine waking up in a coffin and realizing that you were mistakenly buried alive. Now, this wouldn't happen with the medical guidelines we have today. But in the 19th century, old coffins were found with scratch marks on the inside, making this a legitimate concern. So as a solution, they started adding strings inside the coffins that traveled up to the ground and were connected to a little bell. And if you woke up underground in a coffin, you could just ring the bell, signaling that you're still alive. Imagine if you're trapped in the trunk of a vehicle, you should immediately start searching for the glow-in-the-dark release hatch. If you don't see the latch, don't panic. Trunks are not airtight, so there's no risk of running out of oxygen. Try feeling around the edges of the trunk for a handle. This may allow you to release the seat back. As a last resort, kick out one of the brake lights. This small opening will allow you to signal for help. If you're trapped in When you use a derma roller, it pushes a bunch of tiny needles into your face, creating small punctures across the surface. Your brain perceives these small holes as wounds, which triggers your body's natural healing response. The body then sends out cells to make collagen and elastin, which helps your skin stay firm and stretchy. Over time, these cells strengthen the skin, giving a firmer and more youthful appearance. When you use a derma roller, it pushes a bunch of tiny needles into your face. A tiny nail is placed inside the drilled hole. Then it's glued shut and repainted. This makes one side of the die heavier, causing the
Yo, everyone, if you subscribe right now, you're going to shout out from in the middle of the screen. And everyone, make sure to double tap the stream and share this stream to your friends. It means a lot when you do it. But yeah. Hold on, let me unpause.
opposite side to land face up more often, allowing you to cheat. Another method is heating the die slightly, with the number you want pointing upwards. As it cools down, the melted part settles unevenly, which changes its balance, making it more likely to land on your chosen number. And sometimes, certain sides of the die are shaved down to make them flatter. The flatter side doesn't roll as easily, making it land on the bottom with the number you want facing up. A tiny nail is placed. If you get a skin tag, some people think you can just rip them off yourself, but you actually shouldn't do this. You see, skin tags are connected to your body by a thin piece of tissue, and if you looked inside of it, the tag actually has its own nerves and blood vessels. Ripping it off would cause significant bleeding, and the open wound would be susceptible to infection. Instead, if you want them removed, a doctor can freeze them off with liquid nitrogen, which is a better option.
Have you ever wondered why the letter E isn't used to grade? Teachers use A, B, C, D, and F, but they skip E. Why is this? Well, the answer is actually pretty simple. You see, back in the day, schools did use the letter E, but in the 1930s, they decided to stop after students and parents thought that it meant excellent. It was quickly replaced with F, because F for failed made more sense. Have you ever wondered?
The soldier's foot would break through a hidden bamboo slat and into a hole if they stepped onto a cartridge trap. Inside, a bullet was positioned on top of a nail that was fastened to a wooden board. And when the soldier's foot hit this shell, it pushed the nail into the primer. This caused the shell to suddenly explode and shoot back up at the soldier. When a tiny frog hops into a giant tarantula's burrow, it seems like it's walking right into a trap. But the spider checks the frog with its legs, and if the frog has the right chemical signals, it's safe. The frog helps by munching on ants that could attack the spider's eggs. In return, the tarantula becomes the frog's bodyguard, scaring off bigger predators. It makes the frog seem like a pet, but they're really just tolerant roommates. If you plucked out a single strand of your hair, it could hold about 40 pennies without breaking. But if you braid just half of all your hair into a rope, the combined strength could hold up a large SUV. And if you add in all of your hair into the rope, it could withstand about 15 metric tons, which is about the weight of a young gray whale. If you touch a cactus, you'll probably get the spines stuck in your skin. And if you try to pull them out, you can actually break them off in your flesh because they're so fragile. So instead, you should apply a layer of glue over the area. Once it is dried, quickly peel it off in a smooth motion. This will pull out the spines evenly, causing them to stay intact. If you touch a cactus, his teeth were infected and fell out, so by the time he became president, he only had one tooth left. It was removed to fit his dentures, but they weren't made of wood like you might think. Instead, they were crafted from the teeth of animals and even other humans, but they barely fit and were painful to wear. This made it hard to speak, and he even avoided smiling, which is why he looks so grumpy in all of his portraits. His teeth were
A few days ago, I showed you how this trick was done, and I was wrong. This is how I originally explained it. Cane, base, rods, back brace, harness. All that's left for the magician to do is use his core strength to pull his legs up. Well, this magician, known as Special Head, left a comment on my TikTok. He also made a response video proving that my theory is wrong. There appears to be no base or harness. In fact, Special Head has some other videos online where he just touches someone's head and levitates. So what's going on here? What's the real explanation to this trick? The answer is that I have no idea. A few days ago,
if you chip a piece off of your tooth, a dentist might shave down the surrounding area. Then a bonding material that matches your tooth color is applied and shaped to match the original appearance. Once the shape is near perfect, a special light hardens the material, making it as durable as the tooth. Finally, the dentist polishes the tooth to blend it seamlessly with the others. They soak $1 bills in bleach until the ink dissolves. And this is because real bills are made from special paper that's hard to recreate. Once all the ink is gone, a real banknote is left behind, and a printer then prints a fake $100 design. Now, if someone checks the note at a store, it will pass as a standard test. But if they look a little closer, they'll see it's missing the right UV marks, putting an end to the counterfeit operation. Inserting Q-tips in your ear actually just pushes most of the earwax further in. This is so bad for you that even the Q-tip box says not to do it. But odds are you'll still use them even after watching this video. Why? Well, using Q-tips leads to what dermatologists refer to as the itch-scratch cycle. The more you use them, the more your ears itch. And the more your ears itch, the more you use them. Inserting Q-tips.
Do you notice something weird about how Putin walks? He swings his left arm freely, but his right arm seems like it's stuck to his side. Some people have speculated that because this is a sign of early Parkinson's, Putin might be at risk. But the real reason he walks this way has nothing to do with his health. Putin was a KGB officer for 16 years, and in the KGB manual, it spells out the specific way officers should walk so they can always be prepared to handle their weapons. This style of walking perfectly describes the way Putin walks today. Other long-term KGB officers also seem to walk the same way.
What's up, Chill Banana? What's up, Squeaks? What's up,
Do you notice something weird about
If you stepped on a World War II landmine, 3 prongs hidden just beneath the surface would immediately sense the pressure. This pressure would release a striker pin, activating a fuse. Then, an initial explosion propels the mine upwards, reaching about waist height. In the air, the fuse reaches the main charge inside, causing the mine to explode. The casing shatters, ejecting metal fragments at high speed in all directions. If you stepped, the cow knocked him into a pile of manure, snapping his hip. He couldn't move and had no way to call for help. For 5 days, he lay helpless in the dirt, baking in the sun and freezing at night. But he wasn't alone. His goat found him and stayed by his side. At night, she curled up beside him to keep him warm. Days passed, and without food and water, the man grew weak. But the goat let him milk her into an old bottle, getting just enough to survive. Eventually, he was found and rushed to the hospital, but he swears he wouldn't have made it without her. The cow knocked. You know the equal sign in math? Well, back in the day, people actually wrote is equal to instead. And mathematician Robert Ricord was getting tired of writing it over and over. So in 1557, he started using 2 horizontal lines instead. He figured since the 2 lines were the same size, they were equal to each other, which made it the perfect symbol for equality. You know if an octopus loses some of its limbs and then somehow makes it back into the ocean, you might think it would die from the open wounds. But they have an ability that allows them to quickly seal the cut before it becomes infected. Once the wounds begin to heal, new cells can start to reconstruct the missing limbs, and after several weeks, new fully functional tentacles regrow. If an octopus loses some, if you swallowed a watermelon seed, some people think that it could If you swallowed a watermelon seed, some people think that it could potentially sprout in your stomach, meaning you'd literally be growing a watermelon inside of you. Now, this is obviously not true. Your stomach acid would dissolve the seed before it had time to grow. But there was a case of a man who swallowed a pea that ended up going down the wrong way. And months later, after being rushed to the hospital because of breathing problems, a doctor discovered that the pea had been ingested in the man's lung. And because lungs are warm and moist, the pea was able to split open and sprout into a plant. If you place the flies in the fridge until they stop moving. Then slice a matchstick in half and glue a paper-thin wing across the top. Add tiny drops of glue to the wing, 1 for each fly. Then stick the dormant flies on by their bellies, all pointing in the same direction. breathe warm air across their bodies, and as they wake up, their wings buzz back to life, and the whole plane lifts off the ground. Place the fly. The army ant is placed on the wound and positioned so its jaws clamp tightly on the edges, securing them together. Then the ant's body is twisted off, leaving its head and mandibles in place, which acts as a stitch. More are added depending on the size of the wound, and these ant stitches are left in the skin until the edges of the wound stay closed on their own. The army ant is when you pump gas in your car, there's this tiny hole connected to a valve that sucks in air. This air intake keeps the fuel flowing smoothly as it fills your car. But as soon as the tank is full, the gas covers this hole, stopping the airflow and creating a vacuum inside. And this change in pressure triggers the pump to stop the flow of gas. If you took out one of your bones and somehow molded it into a chunk about this big, you might think it would be completely crushed under the weight of a car. But human bones are actually made of a tough mix of minerals and a stretchy protein called collagen. And this makes them so strong that a single cubic inch can support the weight of nearly 5 standard cars. If you puncture a lung, air will move in and out of the wound as you breathe. When this happens, it can fill the space in your chest, putting pressure on your heart. To stop it, find an airtight material like plastic and use it to cover the wound. Next, tape it down on 3 sides. This stops air from getting sucked in but allows it to escape. And lay down on your wounded side to keep your chest under pressure as you wait for help. If you puncture a lung, air will move in and out of the wound as you breathe. He slips one arm into the left wing, while the right wing is attached by a fishing line, and his other arm stretches straight up into the head. His fingers
make sure to subscribe for a shout out in the middle of the screen, and make sure to double tap the screen to like the video. It helps a lot, by the way. So yep.
Move the beak as it talks, and his pinky pulls on a hidden string that controls the eyes. To read lines, a script is taped to the inside of the suit and lit by a tiny LED. And a monitor strapped to his waist shows a live feed, letting him watch his performance in real time. Imagine you woke up dangling on a trapeze high in the sky. You start freaking out. You're so high you can't even see the ground. Now, you have no idea how you got here, but a part of
to get a shout out, turn on your subscriptions in your settings and then subscribe.
you thinks this might be a dream, just because of how odd the situation is. I mean, you can't even see where the chains end. This has to be a dream. This means you should just let go and you'll wake yourself up. But it does feel real. So maybe you shouldn't fall just in case. Hours turn into days and you're getting exhausted. You're afraid you're going to fall asleep and let go on accident. But maybe that's a good thing? There really isn't any other option and time is running out. What do you do? Imagine when you swallow food, it's supposed to go down your esophagus, which leads to your stomach. But there's this different route that leads to your lungs.
Man, I just got a warning. Maybe you got a warning because you spammed caps.
The trachea, and the trachea sits right next to your esophagus. Now, when you swallow, the fleshy parts in your throat move over the trachea, so the food won't go down it. But sometimes, if you eat too fast, the fleshy parts of your throat don't do their job, and the food goes down your trachea, also known as the wrong pipe. When you swallow, the king gave each boy a seed and told them to grow the best plant they could. You see, the king was old and was trying to find an heir to the throne. One boy named Ping loved gardening. He watered his seed, gave it sun, and used the best soil. Keeping close watch, he waited for a sprout, but nothing ever grew. When it was time to show the king, the other boys had huge, colorful plants. But Ping only had his pot with no plant. He decided to bring it anyway. The king looked at every plant without saying a word. until he reached Ping. Then he smiled and announced him as the winner. You see, the king had previously boiled all of the seeds so they couldn't grow, meaning he knew that every other boy had cheated and replaced their seed with a different one. But Ping was honest, and the king knew that honesty was more important than results. If you shoot at bulletproof glass, the outer layer absorbs the impact and shatters. But under this is a tough plastic sheet that acts as a web catching the shattered glass. The energy is then evenly distributed across the surface, which reduces the bullet's force. And if that isn't enough to stop it, there's another layer of glass backed by more plastic that ensures the bullet would not make it all the way through. If you shoot at bulletproof glass, when Pinocchio lies, his nose grows. So what would happen if he said, "My nose is about to grow"? If it did not grow, then that would mean he was lying, which would cause his nose to grow. But his nose growing would then indicate that he was not lying, which means his nose should have never grown. What do you think would happen? If you lose your leg, the skin will close up over the stump and you'll be legless the rest of your life. This is true for almost all creatures, but there is an amphibian called an axolotl that does something different. You see, when this creature loses a limb, the wound quickly closes up to prevent infections. But shortly after, a mass of cells known as a blastema form at the injury. As these cells grow, they morph into bone, nerve, and skin cells. And over time, these cells entirely rebuild the creature's limb from the inside out. He tried to light his shoe on fire mid-flight, but the attendants smelled the burning matches and saw what he was doing. Passengers and crew wrestled him to the ground, and eventually he was sedated. And when they checked his shoes, they discovered a fuse sticking out of each one. It turned out they were stuffed with enough explosives to bring down the entire plane. And that's why you have to take off your shoes at the airport.
There is a secret about Skittles that the company doesn't want you to know about. You see, they claim that the candy comes in 5 different flavors, but the actual truth is that they all taste exactly the same. The only difference is their color and scent. And according to neuropsychologists, that's enough to trick your brain into thinking they have different flavors. There is a secret about...
He dropped big rocks into an empty jar, which represented life's most important things: family, health, and dreams. Next, he poured in a handful of pebbles. They slipped through the gaps, settling around the rocks. But there was still room for them because the important things were already in place. These pebbles were the smaller but still important things, like your job and house. Then he took a scoop of sand and poured it in. The tiny grains filled every crack and crevice. The sand was all the small things, like hobbies, watching TV, and vacation. Now, if the sand had gone in first, there would have been no room for the pebbles. And if the pebbles were first, the rocks wouldn't fit. Meaning the most important things in your life, the rocks, have to go first. Finally, he poured in a cup of coffee. It seeped through the sand into every last microscopic bit of space, completely filling the jar. Because even when life feels full, there's always room for a cup of coffee. He dropped big rocks into an...
Unlock a world of possibilities.
The parasite enters through the gills and clamps onto the fish's tongue with sharp, strong claws. It then severs the blood vessels in the tongue, stopping blood flow, which causes it to die and eventually fall off. Once the tongue is gone, the parasite attaches itself to the remaining stub, becoming the fish's new tongue. As the fish eats, the parasite gets a share of the food, and this creepy thing stays there, living off the fish and acting as its tongue until the host dies. The bullet was shot at the house and ended up going straight through. Inside, a woman and her fiancé froze as the stray bullet headed straight for her. But in between them, her trusty tumbler filled with ice water was sitting squarely on the table. And instead of hitting her, the bullet struck the cup. It sparked against the metal before tumbling harmlessly to the ground, saving her life. The bullet. In 1970, a doctor removed the head of a monkey and transplanted it with another one, painstakingly connecting the tissues in the neck to the donor head. Now, the monkey survived, regained consciousness, and was able to see and hear, but the spinal cord couldn't be connected, so the monkey was unable to move its body. And while the procedure was technically successful, the monkey only lived for a few days.
Imagine being able to...
Most people think soda tabs have this hole so you can turn it around and stick a straw through it. This prevents the straw from bobbing around, keeping it in place. And while this is a pretty handy trick, it isn't the actual reason for this hole. You see, the original soda tabs had a hole big enough to stick your finger through. And this was because in the original design, you literally had to peel and pull the can open. Now, when soda companies switched to this new design, they kept the hole as a relic from the older tabs, and also because it saves on aluminum. Most people think soda tabs have this hole so you can turn it around and stick a straw through it.
Yo, everyone, if you want a shout out in the middle of the screen, make sure to subscribe and double tap the screen. So, yeah. And make sure to join my Discord server in the link in my bio. But, yeah. Make sure to sub for a shout out in the middle of the screen and make sure to double tap the screen. Okay. Let me unpause. Goodbye, Squeaks. What's up, Caleb? Good.
This prevents the straw from bobbing around, keeping it in place. And while this is a pretty handy trick, it isn't the actual reason for this hole. You see, the original soda tabs had a hole big enough to stick your finger through. And this was because in the original design, you literally had to peel and pull the can open. Now, when soda companies switched to this new design, they kept the hole as a relic from the older tabs, and also because it saves on aluminum. Most people think so. If you never cut your fingernails, they'll get longer and longer and longer until they finally start curling around on themselves as they continue to grow. And this is because fingernails actually never stop growing. The longest fingernails in the world currently belong to Diana Armstrong, whose nails are over 42 feet long. Now, if you're like me, you probably find this kind of disgusting, and for good reason. Fingernails aren't meant to grow this long and can actually become a health hazard since they harbor bacteria. If you find yourself in a room with walls closing in, most people will immediately begin to panic. But this wastes time and energy. Instead, look for any mechanism or button that might stop the walls. If you can't find one, use any available objects to wedge between where the walls are moving, providing more resistance to slow them down. If that fails, try climbing up and find a space above the moving walls where you can escape the crushing force. When you shave a hair, you expect it to grow back normally. But occasionally, as the hair grows, it will actually curl back into the skin. This leads to what's known as an ingrown hair. Now, most people think you're just supposed to pluck these out, but that will actually just irritate the area more. If possible, you should guide the tip of the hair in the right direction so it continues to grow correctly. When you shave a hair, you expect it to grow back normally. But occasionally, as the hair grows, it will actually curl back into the skin. This leads to what's known as an ingrown hair. Now, most people think you're just supposed to pluck these out, but if you lost your finger, most people assume you'd be fingerless the rest of your life. But if you manage to get to a hospital quick enough with your cleanly severed finger that isn't too damaged, a surgeon can meticulously connect the tiny blood vessels and the tiny nerves, which reestablishes blood flow and sensation. And if this is done with expert precision, your finger can be reattached, restoring its normal function. They squeezed their shoulders into the flooded tunnel while holding their guns against their chest. Next, they used their feet to inch backward until their whole body was inside. Even though it's filled with water, there's just enough space to breathe. And once they're in, there's only one way out. They have to keep moving through the tiny space without drowning. Now, this 9-foot tunnel is part of the commandos' training, and a warning to recruits is written above. If you enter, you die. Walt Disney took a bite of the hot dog, counted his steps, then tossed the wrapper on the ground, according to the legend. And he watched other guests do the same. When he counted, he found it was about 30 steps before someone would drop their trash. And when he opened Disneyland and installed trash cans, he personally measured out 30 steps between each one. So now, when you walk through a Disney theme park, you'll find a trash can exactly when you need it. Walt Disney. If you cut a pilonidal cyst in half, you'd probably find a clump of hair inside. Now, these hairs typically fall from your head and down the back of your shirt. And as you ruffle around throughout the day, they move down to this area and eventually embed into your skin. Your body perceives them as a foreign object, and the area becomes inflamed. Now, this can eventually cause a cyst to form that entraps more and more hairs as they fall. If you cut When you pull the trigger of a gun, it releases a pin which strikes the primer at the base of the cartridge. Inside this cartridge is a chemically explosive substance known as smokeless powder. The impact from the firing pin ignites this powder inside the cartridge, creating a high-pressure gas that rapidly expands. This energy pushes forward and forces the bullet out of the cartridge, driving it down the barrel of the gun. When you pull the trigger of a You might think shooting zombies is the best defense in the apocalypse, but you'll run out of ammo fast, and the sound only attracts attention. Now, a crowbar could easily crack a zombie skull, and it doubles as a tool, but it's heavy and requires a lot of force to swing, meaning you'll get tired fast. A baseball bat is lighter and still has great reach, but it can splinter, and blunt force might not completely finish off a zombie. Your best weapon would actually be a good pair of running shoes to outrun the zombies, or at least the other humans. When you slice a watermelon in half and in half again, then cut it into wedges, the sticky juices cover your face as you eat. And since it doesn't fit your mouth, you actually lose some of the fruit. Instead, cut the watermelon in half on the short side and flip it over. Next, slice even strips in one direction, then again in the other direction, making a grid. When you pull out a piece, most of them will be the perfect size to fit in your mouth. When you slice a
I didn't want to be this way. I know.
If you poured a bunch of Earths inside the sun, they say it can hold 1.3 million of them. But this calculation is actually wrong. You see, this figure is just taking the volume of each Earth to fill the sun, almost like a liquid. But that doesn't take into account that the Earth is a sphere, and that there would be space between each one. Now, if you factor in this packing density, instead of 1.3 million, it would actually only take about 960,000. If you pour, he would bite down on a metal rod attached to his piano while he played. The vibrations from the piano traveled through the rod, into his jawbone, and reached his inner ear. This technique would send sound vibrations directly to the skull, completely skipping the eardrum, allowing him to hear. And by using this method, Beethoven was able to compose music, even when he was deaf. She was reaching into a donation bin when someone pushed her from behind. The heavy door slammed shut as she fell inside. Now, these bins are built with one-way flaps that swing inward. Once you fall through, the door locks behind you. There's no handle or latch, just smooth metal and steep walls too high to climb. She screamed for help, but no one heard her. And for 3 days, she laid curled up on old clothes with no food or water. Finally, someone heard her cries and firefighters cut her out. But this wasn't her first time. She'd already been rescued from a donation bin 2 times before. She was reaching He stuck a Lego piece up his nose, and it got stuck. So he shoved a different piece in the same nostril because they connected together, and he thought it was a smart way to remove it. But instead, both pieces ended up getting stuck. His mother pulled out the bigger piece, unaware that the smaller one remained deeply lodged inside. For 26 years, he struggled with congestion, asthma, and sleep apnea without realizing why. Then, one day, while blowing his nose in the shower, the Lego piece suddenly popped out after 26 years.
What?
He stuck a... If you're afraid
Wait,
of the
that's
dark, could you hop in a plane and chase the sunset, avoiding nighttime forever? Well, you would need a plane that could fly west faster than the Earth spins, and it would have to stay at supersonic speed for days without stopping, meaning you would need another plane to refuel yours mid-air. Oh, and the aircraft would need to mostly run on autopilot so you could sleep and take breaks. But if you don't have a plane, you could just get a flight to the North Pole. You see, for 6 months, the sun doesn't set in Earth's poles. It just circles the horizon non-stop. And when it finally starts to get dark halfway through the year, just hop on a flight to the South Pole, where the sun is just rising for another 6 months. If you were swallowed by a sperm whale, you would be squeezed down its massive throat. You'd continue down the esophagus and into a series of stomach chambers that are filled with digestive acids. And these acids would immediately start breaking down your body. But even if you managed to avoid the acid, the lack of air inside the whale would quickly cause you to suffocate. If your eyeballs fully popped out of your head, you would completely lose your vision. So what would you actually see? Well, most people think that you would see darkness, like pitch black. But that's not actually true. You wouldn't see darkness because you wouldn't see anything at all. It would be like trying to see out of your elbow. There's no visual input, which means you quite literally see nothing. Not darkness, not pitch black, nothing. If your eyeballs fully popped out of your head, you would completely lose your vision.